Hi, everybody. Good day from around the world. I'm Kyle Ellicott, your host today for another edition of VCTV. Very excited to have you back as we are doing these episodes daily, ongoing on all different topics, all different industries, and all different subjects to educate you, our audience, on what is happening in the world, what's changing, where to make investments, and where to build and prepare yourself for success on any seat at any table. And today, I'm joined by some outstanding friends, and one in particular who we've been chatting with offline here in California. But before we get started on our subject today, which we're going to be talking about something very, very critical, no matter what industry you're in, and that's manufacturing, supply chain, and logistics. These are all three industries that have been top of mind. If you are hardware, software, infrastructure, it does not matter. Whether you're a consumer, investor, these are things that are important, and they have dramatically changed, not just in the last 6 months, but in the last 18 plus months, as things have continually accelerated, shifted, changed, and localized in each of these areas. And I'm joined by Ivan, a good friend who we're going to talk deep into this subject and some of his experience along with mine on all of these areas. But a quick shout out to Elena and to the entire LA Token team for making this all happen, as she and the team does every single day, bringing us together here on VCTV. And thank you, our audience, for tuning in. At any point, if you have questions, comments, you want to give us a like, click the subscribe button, feel free to drop any comments or questions in the chat box. We'll do our best. If we can't answer them during today's show, both Ivan and I, Elena, we're all available on social media. Happy to chat with you at any time, and feel free to reach out. So without further ado, Ivan, good sir, welcome back to the show.
Everyone. I hope all is well. So Kyle, talk to me.
Yeah, so before we jump in, quick reminder to everybody. So a little intro, a little background, who you are, how you got into this space, and then we're going to jump in.
My name is Ivan Niku. I'm the managing partner at a fund called Navigate Ventures. And we focus on enterprise software companies that are in between their A round and the growth round. And we want to essentially navigate these companies to their growth rounds, essentially. I started as a software engineer. I did my MBA, started building companies from scratch, grew them, got into investment banking, and after that, started investing. And then 20 years later, we have a fund again, Navigate Ventures, and now we're pretty much focused on that area. So enterprise software goes across industries. What we are looking for is B2B enterprise companies that are really focused on that. And funny enough, we just made two investments, one in logistics and one in manufacturing last week.
I mean, we couldn't have better timed this. Yeah, it couldn't have been better timed. Even though this was pre-scheduled, it could not have been better timed.
I know, it was a coincidence.
I love it. And as I said, I mean, we both have a storied history. So I come from a background of similar respects, but not nearly as accomplished as yourself yet. I'm striving for it. But I spent many years in the Internet of Things, hardware, consumer devices, spent time in Asia, here in the US, Latin America, et cetera, and saw how these areas, very specifically manufacturing, supply chain, and logistics, were not only important, but were very different in how things were shifting around. And the last 6 months, I think we both have talked about on previous shows and can agree, things may have been forever changed in these three categories. Would love to hear your kind of just general thoughts on what's happening in these spaces. And then I want to dive into those investments as well. But what's happening? What's changing?
In order to understand what is happening currently, you have to understand the context of, let's take manufacturing. If you go back 20, 30 years, you had SAP and Oracle and the likes that came up with the ERP systems to streamline manufacturing and modularize everything from GLA, APAR to whatever down the line manufacturing modules that you needed. And then that moved into becoming verticalized, whether it was pharmaceuticals, whether it was manufacturing of products, or whatever the case may be. So that was all within the context of a manufacturing environment. Then the concept was, how do you connect this manufacturing environment with the supply chain of the products that were required to manufacture those products? And then you came up with the EDIs and how to connect the areas together and so on and so forth. And then there was a context of how do you ship the manufactured products from point A to point B. Funny enough, that is the one area where very little progress has been made. So if you fast forward today, all the ERP systems are there and they produce what they're supposed to produce, and they do provide a streamlined manufacturing environment, but they don't optimize the manufacturing environment, because the world is now such that you can optimize based on a number of factors, including the environment, including humidity, the supply of products, the demand on the other end. You can verify a number of things. You can also look at how to streamline the shipping of products, or whether it's raw material or end products, from point A to point B. And there's very little transparency in that industry currently. And it's still done with phones and faxes, believe it or not, in large scale. There's a few other areas that we're looking at, which is thematic. If you think about it, a third of the food that is transported is lost. Because the containers within which the food is transported are not monitored or measured. They don't have the sensors. So that's just a huge waste of food that is taking place that could be put to good use otherwise. And so the number of areas where people can make a difference right now is very, very huge. And we can dig in a little bit deeper into what are some of the areas we're looking at. Our friend Nandan is on as well, so maybe we can say hello to him.
Yeah, I'm about to introduce him. I want to make one quick point. So on the food supply, what's crazy about that is that's an accepted fact.
Yeah.
That the industry has accepted the fact, for those in our audience, that a third or give or take just gets lost. It just disappears. And that's okay in terms of the supply chain, where we go from, say, the farm to our plates or to the grocer. It's just going to happen. And that's not just the only industry. This is happening throughout many industries, where loss prevention is just, hey, things happen because it's not that big of an issue. Or if it is, there haven't been many solutions, to your point, to really optimize the full piece. It's just small little bits and pieces that are slowly making it better, but not on a whole. But let's hold that for a second. Nandan, welcome back to the show, sir. How you doing?
Kyle, Evan, hi guys. I'm all good. Sorry for the delay. I had some issue with my system. All good, all safe. Look forward to this. It's one of my favorite topics, and yeah.
Wonderful. Well, quick reintroduction to the audience on yourself and a little background of why this is so interesting for you.
Sure. So I work with Axela Ventures. We're one of the most active seed funds and early stage funds in India. I specifically lead B2B and enterprise tech investing. So within Axela, we've been looking at a lot of sectors, of course, global SaaS, enterprise SaaS, and sectors like that. And apart from that, a lot of startups around the supply chain and logistics side of things. So given that the geography that we specifically work in India, a lot of it is nascent, right? I just heard Ivan mentioning things are still done over fax and phone, whereas in India, a lot of it is still done on pen and paper, right? So a lot of opportunities around digitization, automation of all of that. Plus a lot of new models emerging on the marketplace side of things as well. So overall, a lot of for a lot of countries, the pandemic has come at the wrong time in terms of manufacturing and supply chain. But I also see a lot of countries that have specifically benefited from this pandemic on the supply chain side of things.
Why is this so difficult? I mean, you both bring this up, and I've worked in, again, this space as well, advising companies and talking with them on it. Is why is this so hard? You want to track a container of food from point A to point B. Why is that so difficult? We have the technology. What's the roadblock? So Ivan, we'll start with you. Nandan, we'll come back to you. So what are some of the roadblocks that are holding this up from progressing?
I don't believe at all it's a question of technology, because it's there and it's very simple technology. You can have sensors in the containers that can measure the temperature, the humidity, the location, everything. It's not that. It has to do with how the industry grew. So first of all, there's very few large players in the industry, and they control everything. And the way they're compensated does not give them incentive to fix this problem, because their job is to transport. Their job is not to optimize. So, and the owners have not changed their ways. I was working with a company recently, which I don't want to name, but they are the largest marketplace for farmers in South America to be able to sell their foods directly to the consumers, which are the wholesalers in North America. And that's the first time that's been done. Dole is the biggest player in that segment. Their marketplace is $4 billion a year. But because it's concentrated within a few hands, there's been a lack of competition, therefore a lack of incentive to make things better.
Right. And I agree with you. And, there's one argument on the tech side that connectivity is still an issue, but I agree. It's the incentive that's the true issue. And, Nandan, would love to hear your further thoughts on this.
Sure. So I think adding on to what Ivan said, I think the manufacturing and supply chain industries are industries with a lot of layers, right? They're middlemen in every step of the process. So unlike any other business where there's a direct interaction between the producer of that good or service and the end consumer, there are multiple layers over here. So there's a wholesaler, a middleman, 2, 3 other middlemen within the logistics side of things. So the difficulty is in having uniformity and consistency across all these layers. So perhaps one logistics player is tech enabled and a bit more modern, whereas someone else is a bit more backward, right? In terms of adopting technology and adopting any kind of new practices on the supply chain side of things. Given that there's so many layers, there is incentivization happening at every layer, right? If there are 10 middlemen, every middleman over there wants to be compensated and has a percentage of the revenue or the sale price or whatever it is. So everyone tries to squeeze the maximum out of these things and hence causing inefficiencies. Everyone puts themselves ahead of the other, which means that the end consumer and the brand themselves are forgotten to a large extent, right? So the number one reason for this, according to me, is the number of layers in this entire process of supply chain.
So with everything else being digitized so quickly in the past 6 months and a little bit before, is this an area that we finally see some change? Do we finally see this mindset forcefully changed because there has been now a switch where companies are having to focus things more localized, right? You've got a higher consumer demand. You've got a shift in getting goods to customers. Is this really going to happen? Are we going to see a digitization of these three industries, or one in particular more than the others?
The investment we made recently was in a company called Blue X Trading. And it's the first company that's creating an end-to-end platform for the large carriers to manage the movement of containers around the world. Believe it or not, right now, there's not even sensors on the most containers to tell you where they are. And the pricing on the containers is not transparent. And there's a number of other things that are happening. So that's one step towards it. We made our investment in a company called Odin AI that is optimizing the manufacturing process. So they use a number of elements. So I think we're likely to see a few changes. Number one, I think it is the right thing to move towards growing food a little bit more locally. And there's a lot of companies that are doing it, whether it's vertical farming or growing foods on the roofs of the high density cities or so on and so forth. The second is, I think food has been quite inexpensive. So the cost of technology superseded the incentive of trying to save that cost of that food. But as the cost of technology is being lowered, it now may make sense to digitize to a point where saving that food becomes a little bit more important. That's the way I see it. And I think once one of them one player sees traction, you're going to see a lot of other players see traction as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the idea of getting hyper localization, which has been a common thread throughout VCTV for the past 2-3 weeks, almost every episode I've done, we've brought that up in some way. I think that is coming, right? You bring up AI, which I want to touch on around data, because to me, even though we did have a guest, David, who mentioned some of the data may be skewed, we just had some of the biggest data aggregation around logistics than we may have ever had in the past 10 years. Just happened in the last 6 months, right? You have tier 1 here in the US, tier 2 cities that logistics was very well set up or understood. Now tier 3, tier 4, And in smaller cities, now we have data on how to maximize those logistics in supply chain routes in ways that, again, we just never have before. I'm excited to see where that goes as we're seeing real estate purchases maybe leveraging for that, right, with movie theaters and shopping malls here in the States as well. And we'll unpack that further. But Nandan, any further comments on what you're seeing in India or just in general throughout Asia?
Sure. So I think we are still a few steps behind the established markets in terms of digitization of supply chain and things like that. But I think one common behavioral trait that we've seen on the digitization part is someone needs to impose the fact that things need to be digitized. And this can only come in either from the government or it can come in from the large brands, right? Large brands either on the supply side or the demand side. So unless you impose stating that all my middlemen need to be digitized, this is not really going to work. It's not going to be an individual behavioral shift, nor is it going to be the role of a tech company who comes in and says that everything needs to be digitized. So it's the key players around this space, either the brands or the government themselves coming in and stepping into things to digitize the entire process. Having said that, we're seeing a lot of new models emerging. Combination of a marketplace kind of model and a software-led model in a lot of industries. So we're seeing this happening in the CPG industry. We're seeing this happening in the apparel sourcing industry. Basically, everyone wants to step up their demand and everyone wants to step up their supply. So they do whatever it takes to get to that route, even if it means adopting new kind of technology. At least in the food and agri space, we're still a bit behind, but we have a lot of companies that are leveraging computer vision and things like that to scan for vegetables and fruits, and that easily tells you how old the vegetable or fruit is. So that plays a key role in the supply chain so that the end consumer does not get expired goods or close to expired goods. So baby steps, but on the right track, I think.
Well, and you mentioned technologies and baby steps are progress nonetheless, right? I looked at a company not long ago that was doing machine learning around just damaged crates. So if a crate was damaged, right? Or an Internet of Things company, so IoT company that was monitoring pallets or looking at getting containers from point A to point B, which we have a gap, but they were actually doing it, leveraging different types of connectivity. What other types of technology are you seeing being leveraged? Ivan, I want to come back to you on this around AI and data, but I mean, we've got all this tech. How are we using it? Why aren't we using it? And how could we use it?
I think any company these days that's going to be a serious player in an industry, you're going to be data first. The joke is like, especially with e-commerce. With e-commerce, you're not selling products. You're a data company that happens to sell products. And the same thing applies here. So the new technologies around AI and data are all very readily available. The issue is, for most people, the ability to use it in a productive manner. So the people that are true data scientists that know how to extract the appropriate usable information from the data are hard to find. So many companies may have a ton of data, but they have no more intelligence than they did before. They have no actionable item. They don't know what to do with it. And so they're still guessing. That's part of it. The other thing is, oftentimes you're going to find that the data is coming from different silos. Therefore, they're not the same format. So the data integration part itself is a headache. So that's where they get stuck as well. So the scrubbing and converting data all into one format from which you can drive some really useful information is sometimes very, very difficult. I think this is a question of time. It's going to go slow, slow, slow. And at some point, there's a tipping point. And then if you remember a long time ago, we had the internet and nobody knew what to do. And now internet is embedded. I think same thing. It's going to get to a point where all of a sudden, everybody is it's like second nature to every company. But we're still a little bit of ways away because the tools are still difficult to use, even though they're there, and they haven't made it to the point where everybody can use them easily and readily.
Well, and I think it's also a mindset, right? And
Yeah.
it's a change within the organization, big or small. Excuse me, just like the internet, blockchain, AI, you name it. There's a mindset change. So you bring up something very interesting is silos. So for
Yeah.
those that are building in this is something you have to remember, is that an organization is generally siloed in the data that it shares or does not. And so you're trying to aggregate, and this is an opportunity, but you're trying to aggregate multiple data sources into one to then spread back out to optimize something. And this is easy for us to talk about, but it is a huge, huge problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah.
But it also starts with the mindset. So if you're building in this space, I mean, here's free advice. Get into the corporate's head, help those executives understand why this is a problem, show more facts, show more data, show more relevancy, and then introduce your technology as you spread. But Nandan, I didn't mean to take over your spot there, but I'll let you continue on it.
Sure. So, Kyle, I think I have this general belief in technology and VC that the problem is not technology or availability of technology. It's a human problem, right? So like you said, there's a certain pattern that's already going on, existing out there in the supply chain. People are very comfortable with it. And for them to get out of the comfort zone and adopt new kind of technology takes a long time, right? So unless they see tangible results immediately, the human tendency of instant gratification, right? Unless they see results immediately, they're not really going to change their way of doing things. If they're taking notes in pen and paper, it's very difficult for them to open a mobile app and scan something or do something around that. The second problem is in things like IoT, etc. Who's the end user? An end user is someone who's a laborer in a manufacturing plant or a setting over there. They've not seen this kind of technology, and hardware is usually fascinating for them. So there's a lot of pilferage that happens as well. People just take away things home, sensors and stuff like that. But it's a behavioral change that needs to happen at the ground level. So while companies try to train their staff and things like that, again, as I said, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. And if it has to happen at one layer, it has to happen at multiple layers for the entire chain to work. So data is available in silos, like Evan said, and aggregation of all this data is going to cause something massive, but it's still going to take a lot of time to get the accuracy correct and anything around the data right.
Which creates another huge opportunity around analytics. I mean, dashboards. So you both are SaaS investors. Would love to get your thoughts on this, because to me, it doesn't matter if it comes from one source or 10,000 sources. There is an opportunity to put all of this in one-ish visual platform, right? Where as an enterprise, I can see everything. The idea that I remember one of the top manufacturers, and to Ivan's point, I won't name them, but one of the top manufacturers in the world, I got the chance to see their inside command center. And this thing looked like they were, sending rockets to space, but they could monitor an entire supply chain end to end anywhere in the world as things were shipping around land, air, and sea. And this should be top of mind for everybody, being able to open up that one app, whether it's on your iPad, your laptop, and see all of this. And then doing something with that data, right? Actually mining it in some way, teaching it, doing something to give you analytics, whether that's predictive or that's behavioral. So what you should be doing or what is happening, and mining that to better optimize everything and make you more money. But guys, you're the SaaS investors. Tell me what you're seeing in this area. Is this something that's coming, or is this just me hopeful and wishful?
So I think the analogy that I can make is, if you look at the large players that have the means and the resources to do it, look at Apple, look at, for example, Amazon, those types of companies are completely vertically integrated, and they have the ability and the resources to do exactly what you've said. They have complete transparency every step of the way. But that's vertical integration. But if you look at an industry horizontally, for example, in the shipping industry, Maersk is trying to do it, but they're trying to do it by acquiring a lot of different companies and stitching them together. So we're in an industry where the number of different players involved, it is more difficult to do it. A third party has to come in and do it. And that is sometimes more difficult. It takes longer. You have to be Switzerland to all the players. But what you're saying is absolutely the only way that you can bring optimization. So I'm seeing it in most industries. They have it. They have their own dashboards. You can buy third-party dashboards. The dashboards are not that difficult. Getting the appropriate data, distributing data appropriately, and believe it or not, to provide the right compensation plans for the management teams to act on that data becomes a big point. One of the reasons many American companies did not do well when everything being online and e-commerce became a big thing is because they were compensated to shampoo, rinse, repeat, whatever they were doing before. They were not compensated to adjust to the new changes because the new changes were so small, they didn't make a dent in the overall numbers. So the compensation plans actually make a very, very big difference in adjusting to the new realities as well.
Not done.
So the short answer to your question, Kyle, is that tools like this have existed for several years and decades, but it's been done by the large enterprises, right? Legacy software companies, et cetera, selling to the likes of Musk and any other large logistics enterprise out there. The problem with the legacy software is that it's not evolved as quickly as it should have, right? So a lot of SaaS companies have come in, the visualizations have improved, the way you consume data has improved significantly. So if you're going to continue with a legacy software where you still need to do an Excel dump of all the data and then put 10 people on the job just to analyze that data, the industry is going to keep going at a very slow pace. So I think there has been a lot of reluctance from enterprises to adopt new age SaaS solutions and things like that. So unless you're offering something more than just SaaS, either in the form of a marketplace or some kind of managed service provider out there who uses analytics and data and a software piece as one of the features of his products, it's not really flown out there. So it continues to be a large opportunity for legacy software companies to continue to improve their software and dashboards. You can bring in graphs, you can bring in all kinds of visualization out there to improve things. So once they start doing that, I think logistics companies are going to be more comfortable consuming data and new visualizations than it already exists. So the end goal, I think, for most SaaS companies or more pure play SaaS companies is to be acquired by these legacy players. But standalone as such, I don't think they'd go on to become large companies because the willingness to pay for just software is on the lower side on the logistics industry. So unless you're like a complete end-to-end service provider, that's where your real chunk of revenue lies in.
And you keep mentioning the word marketplace. Let's dive deeper into that. You said this is something that needs to exist. So what is a marketplace in the context of these industries for our audience?
Right. So I think marketplace in the supply chain and manufacturing side has been a big talking point in Asia as a whole, right? Typically how Asian countries or Southeast Asian countries work is that, it's cheap labor, cheap manufacturing, you manufacture and you sell it to the global countries like some European countries or probably the US, right? The problem for the companies in the US and Europe is you don't have visibility on who are the good manufacturers unless you come here, you make a trip, you go around factories, you don't have any kind of visibility around that. So marketplaces are solving that to a large extent where you have a bunch of suppliers on one side. And then the suppliers are tiered based on their pricing, the rating, quality of delivery, and things, so on and so forth. So it becomes easy for the brands sitting in a different continent just to scroll through these marketplaces, get a quotation online immediately. And within a week, you can start services right over there, right? So you have a bunch of suppliers over there, and you have a bunch of buyers as well on the platform. So a lot of these are managed marketplaces, and they've taken off in a big way in Asia, primarily because you have the cost arbitrage. You manufacture it at a low price and you sell it at a high price in global markets. So that's something extremely fascinating. And given that you're managing the entire workflow and process through the marketplace, there is a lot of data available, right? So you just offer dashboards to both the buyers and the suppliers. You use all that data to streamline all your processes, make it more efficient, and thereby save on costs. This is one of the reasons marketplaces have thrived in these industries, at least in Asia and Southeast Asia.
So how, as things have shifted a little bit more localized, how are marketplaces changing? Because for years we've talked about this technology called 3D printing, and that 3D printing was going to revolutionize everything, and we were going to just manufacture everything via 3D prints, which I do believe is going to come. I will say that it will be there on some scale soon. In some places it is today. How does 3D printing play a role in this new wave of manufacturing at a more hyper localized level? And Ivan, I saw you chuckling. I'm going to start with you on this one. Go for it.
Over the past couple of years, a few interesting projects have come our way. So a lot of people started 3D printing, for example, for jewelry, for dolls, for toys, for this and that. And all that is fine. But the area where I think it's making the biggest impact is low-income housing. I think so these people are able to 3D print a house in 48 hours. And it's a beautiful house. And I think, and the cost is very, very low. And the machine literally moves there, prints it, and out they go. So to me, that's a very good use of it. But I'm not really well versed in 3D printing, other than the fact that, they're in manufacturing, it is making a very big impact because you can 3D print certain things that you cannot manufacture. So we were taking a tour of SpaceX, and they were showing us the modules that they're making that were not, were physically not possible to make years ago, but the only way they do it is 3D print them right now. So I think we're going to see, we're not going to know about a lot of what is going on with 3D printing in manufacturing, because it's providing the manufacturers with ways to print things that they couldn't normally manufacture as parts for themselves. So we've seen some really, really interesting stuff, but not on the commercial side. It's mostly on the enterprise side.
Right, on a big scale as well. And Nandan, I mean, you're not far from the manufacturing hub of the world, right? Are you seeing a shift even in India and probably in Thailand and Vietnam, where there's additional manufacturing resources as well? Are you starting to see a shift towards something like 3D printing, or is this a new service that people are offering in terms of manufacturing in general?
It is a new service people offering in general. But having said that, 3D printing is still a new concept to a lot of people, right? We're seeing big use cases in healthcare, especially in the orthopedic and dentistry side of things. A lot of 3D printing happening over there. We're also seeing 3D printing happening on something in the manufacturing space, which is repetitive, right? So one of the biggest consumption of 3D printing in India is in the car and automotive industry, especially on the component side, right? You have gearboxes, you have different parts as a part of the car chassis, which don't really need separate machines, right? The specs are predefined and things like that. So it's easy to kind of manufacture it in large scale using 3D printing. But we do see a larger variety over here. People do tend to choose 3D printing for mass manufacturing. But for anything on the prototyping side, 3D printing is yet to pick up. But you continue to see existing processes like CNC and other processes around that for prototyping. But something on the large scale and mass manufacturing is seeing 3D printing coming to the fore.
And Ivan, similar on this topic of short form prints, but moving more back into logistics. So here in the US, we've seen a dramatic shift, forcefully and non-forcefully, in the past 6 months from traditional commerce to e-commerce, just in general, right? Is this something that has forever changed how we look and think about logistics, including fulfillment centers? I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of discussion around commercial real estate and potentially the purchase of this by large logistics and shipping companies to create more localized fulfillment centers. Are you seeing this as a trend to stay, or is this just, talk because of the current situation?
No, it's definitely a trend that's going to accelerate. If you think about e-commerce today, e-commerce currently in the United States represents about 10.5% of total commerce. So it's still in its nascent stages. So it has a long ways to go. But the impact of e-commerce continuing the way it is if you look at industrial real estate, the prices have gone up. Storage facilities have become more expensive. And I think this is a trend that is going to continue, and its impact is going to have manifestations around real estate, around last mile delivery, which is why those companies are valued so highly right now, potentially around payment, as well as all the other aspects of the supply chain. I think insurance and transportation and financing and payment and real estate are all going to be affected. And this is a trend that will continue in a very, very big way.
Last mile and insurance, two things you just brought up. Last mile has been talked about in many different ways, but how is that going to change? And then insurance, we just talked earlier in the show of how much money is just lost in terms of product. This sounds like a gigantic opportunity for insurance, insurtech in general. Both of you would love to hear your thoughts around where is last mile delivery and what could it be, but then also insurtech as that introduces itself as well.
I'll just give one comment about last mile. You saw Instacart's valuation last week. It's massive, and it's a delivery company. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
So these companies are valuable at scale, not when they're small. But we are finding that, for example, I have a friend of mine that has a delivery company in Spain right now that because of COVID, it just picked up and now it's going through the roof. It tends to be habitual. Once people use it, then they tend to continue to use it. So this was a bit of a boost to that last mile delivery business. Nandan, what are you seeing?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Characteristics of Asian markets and India specifically, it's very different. So you have several hundreds and thousands of pin codes. So last mile does play a massive role in overall fulfillment. But I think in addition to last mile, there are several other opportunities. You're seeing reverse logistics because e-com deliveries are not successful most of the time. You have defective products, etc., which need to be taken back, right? But overall, I think enough and more has been said about consumer and B2C commerce. What I'm personally excited about is the adoption of e-commerce by B2B players, right? You're seeing a lot of B2B commerce and B2B marketplaces. You're seeing e-commerce going through the roof, especially on things where you have predictable orders and you know that you need to make an order for the next month. You're seeing B2B commerce hitting the roof over there because you're getting everything on time, you're getting fulfillments happening on time and on demand, most importantly. So that's personally something I'm excited about because the ticket values are significantly higher. For example, in manufacturing, right, you have equipment manufacturing, you have marketplaces thriving purely by selling manufacturing equipments, diggers, and those kind of things. So that's personally something I'm excited about. Yes, B2C commerce will continue to rise. The added trend to that in India is that you're seeing adoption happening in tier 2 and 3 cities, which are previously not exposed to the internet. So in addition to all of that, massive opportunity for logistics and last mile, specifically because of reverse logistics. And then you're seeing B2B commerce hitting the roof as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'll just add, when I was in Asia, spending time in China and Hong Kong, one of the things that I saw, and also just general research around some of the things that JD and Alibaba were doing, is the idea of streamlining that process, right? Where you could do OTO, so online to offline shopping, right? So you could start shopping online, finish filling your cart in the store, or you could actually, and while you're doing that, you could just walk around, scan things, pick things off an app, and in the back, little do you know, those items are being picked up, put in a basket, and dropped for you at the very front of the store, right? So that type of logistics, I think we are very far away from here in the US, but in Asia, and again, certain parts of Southeast Asia, this is common life. It'd be interesting to see how and where we get there. But one piece of this is insurance, right? There's still insurance. If you order something, it's protected in some way. But on the B2B side and B2C, where is insurtech playing a role? Where are the opportunities? Ivan, and I'm going to start with you. You threw this word out there, so let's start with you. Where are you seeing insurance playing a role?
We are seeing the emergence of funds that are literally focused on this area, which means there's a ton of opportunities, but they're still trying to figure it out. So I don't have a good answer for you here, other than there's a lot of money trying to figure this out. That's all I can say, but I don't have anything better for you there. Sorry.
No, Nandan, I mean, are you seeing anything? To me, this is an open book in a good way. Yeah, entrepreneurs and investors should be looking at this space nonstop.
Well,
because
in
something
all honesty,
needs to be
yes,
protected. To you, Nandan. I think there was a delay on my side. Apologies to you.
Yeah, so a lot of things happening. So it's not just about investors throwing in a lot of money, but there's also a lot of premiums flowing in, right? So if you take traditional insurance apart, now each time I buy a mobile phone or something expensive on an e-commerce site, I can buy insurance for it, right? Whether it gets lost in transit, in delivery, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of premiums being paid towards that, but it's still early in terms of claims data because I don't think people are claiming enough at this point in time, but premiums are definitely hitting the roof. And a lot of insurtech companies have specifically launched products towards millennials or e-commerce, the e-commerce audience. So what that essentially means is that anything you buy on an e-commerce platform above a certain ticket value, you have an insurance attached to that, and you pay for the insurance as well. So the space is picking up, but still too early to have any data around claims or how the overall cycle is doing right now.
So what has both of you excited in SaaS? I mean, you're both B2B, you're both in SaaS and enterprise, different levels, early to mid and growth stage. What has you excited in these spaces right now, coming out of or continuing in this next era as we look forward to a new future? Nandan, I want to start with you. You're at the early stage. What's getting you excited in B2B and SaaS, aside from marketplaces? Because you've told us how excited you are about marketplaces. We're there. We're on that same page. What else has got you excited?
Right. So the many aspects to SaaS. So you have pure play SaaS, but then you have IoT-enabled SaaS as well, right? So you have a lot of things happening on the automation side, accelerated by COVID, of course, because thanks to COVID, people don't want close clusters. You don't want too many people either on the logistics side or in the warehouses or manufacturing plants. So you're trying to automate a bunch of those processes. We've made a bunch of investments in these spaces as well to digitize and automate manufacturing shop floors, to digitize the entire process flows and things like that. But a lot of activity happening on the IoT side as well, both time and attendance, just the market attendance of people coming to those shifts. You have tracking based IoT, and then you have security based IoT as well. So you just integrate them onto manufacturing plants and ensure that the plants are secure, machinery is secure, and so on and so forth. You have all of that. On the logistics side, particularly, there are a lot of startups doing route optimization and things around route optimization. How do you make a trip more efficient, thereby saving a lot for the customer on the whole? So these are a few areas, but I don't think a pure play SaaS company is really going to win out, but it's going to be a combination of things, either on the IoT side or something on the digitization side of things.
I'm with you on that, and Ivan, I would love to hear your thoughts further. I mean, mid-stage plus, what are you seeing? What's exciting?
Areas. One is the old technologies that are dominating a lot of manufacturing and distribution need to be updated. The old SAP implementations and JD Edwards, all of that needs to be up to date. The second thing is I'd love to see how enterprise SaaS, B2B enterprise SaaS and marketplaces can disintermediate traditional industries that have remained untouched by this. A friend of mine's working on a project right now where they're democratizing small co-location spaces for servers. So there's a lot of industries that are really not entirely connected. They're not entirely efficient. They're not optimized. But there are traditional industries that it's more difficult to do. It's not like you're just implementing software. So you have to integrate a lot. Those are the ones that I'm really most interested in because they can bring out a lot of value once you do that. So there's latent value, latent demand that you can unlock by doing that.
Well, and like anything in enterprise, it takes time, right? The idea of digital transformation, as a lot of the industry still. Yeah, I mean, Nandan, you're speaking it too. It's enterprise sales is one thing. Enterprise digital transformation, these are legacy systems with tons of different data, as we've continued to mention. It takes time to migrate these things over. If you're in it for the long haul and you're ready, you've got the solution that both Ivan and Nandan have mentioned. You've got opportunity for years in front of you as well, which is encouraging. But to you both, so jumping back to the bigger topic of supply chains here, how should founders be thinking about their supply chains going forward, because things are very different through everything we just talked about today. So let's get away from the enterprise. Let's get back to the founders. How should founders be thinking about their supply chains going forward? If you have some advice for that. So Ivan, we'll start with you.
First, you have to know your industry code to understand where the inefficiencies are. Then you have to be able to identify how you can capture the data from one point to the next so you can bring efficiencies and transparencies to that. And of course, you have to do it from point A to point B all the way through. And that's the difficult part because understanding an industry really, really well and being able to implement such plan is very difficult. It is really, really difficult, which is why what we're finding is that for these things to happen, you typically have two co-founders. One of them is an industry expert, and the other one is a CEO that has done something like an enterprise software company or a marketplace before. That tends to be the best combination, but it cannot be one person being able to do both.
Nandan.
Yeah, I think one thing clearly coming out of this crisis is that diversification is key. You need to diversify the number of suppliers you have, diversify the number of supply chain mechanisms in between. I think gone are the days where you'll have any kind of exclusive contracts saying that, I'm the exclusive supplier to X or Y, because you don't know what's going to hit at what time in terms of logistics. So it is paramount that you diversify your supply base as well as your demand base, depending on who you are. To startups or companies starting up in the space, it is a massive opportunity. I think COVID has just reset everything. You're now at ground zero, and the only way forward is up, right? Everyone's trying to do supply chain now. I know a lot of fashion tech companies in India that have pivoted to supply chain during time of COVID. Everyone's trying to get into the space. So people are going to be adopting more because they're looking at diversifying bases as well. So this is a massive opportunity, not just on logistics. You can digitize, you can get into fintech on the supply chain side, fintech as well, right? I read in some report that the receivable days or the time taken to kind of pay off an invoice has gone up significantly during time of COVID. So from an average of 30 days, it's gone up to about 38 days in 3 months or so. So massive fintech opportunity in terms of receivables management, trade financing, or anything on the working capital side of things as well. So it's all hit a reset right now, and it's the best time to build out anything in this space.
And as an investor, how are you looking at companies in this space? Because it is so massive, right? How are you looking at opportunities? How maybe your diligence process changed a little bit during this time around these industries? And I think it's just good for not just our audience as founders, but also our audience of investors, understanding how to look at these companies. We spoke about this yesterday around artificial intelligence and looking deeper beyond the word AI and looking at the algorithms, looking at really what's under the hood of the tech stack. So same to you, Nandan, starting there. What's changed and how are you looking, and how is diligence slightly different?
Right. I think the diligence process has opened up significantly. So, pre-COVID, I think diligence was just around, can you be a standalone market leader in the space? Post-COVID or during COVID, I think the realization is that there can be several market leaders in different pockets in the geography itself. So there are use cases, there's space for a lot of players. So it's not going to be a case of, yes, you're not among the top 2 or 3, and hence I'm not going to pursue this opportunity. The second thing is, what else can you build on top of what you're currently building, right? If you started on the logistics side, what else can you expand to? Can you become a software player? Can you do fintech? Can you become an integrated service provider? And finally, I think there's more diligence going on whom you're selling to and whom you're going to actually make the revenue from, because supply chain is unique that you can grow your users from one side, but it's not necessarily the same set of users, get you your revenue, right? It can be the complete opposite side of things as well. So a lot of diligence goes into that. We're seeing a lot of SaaS companies saying, I'm looking to replace the SAPs of the world, etc. It's easy to build something that's more visually appealing compared to SAP, but it's more difficult to get the enterprise of the world to adopt such products because they have legacy contracts which go on for several years. So to dethrone that has become significantly tougher. So unless you offer something that's more of a significant value proposition rather than just a software, it's not really flying forward. So a lot of learnings. It perhaps hasn't changed our diligence process so much, but a lot of learnings to take back into our thesis as well.
Ivan, same to you.
For us, the order by which we look at a company is obviously team, team, team. Then we look at the problem they're solving. Is it a big and growing problem that's going to remain there? What are the unit economics and the monetization mechanism? Do they have product market fit? And if all those things are met, we want to look at essentially number one, is there any churn? Because churn is a very massive issue, so we don't want to see any churn at all. Then do they have the ability to increase the average contract value with the existing customer year over year? So grow existing customers. And for diligence, a few things we look at, obviously the unit economics at length, but also speak to their customers. Why did you buy this technology? And the answers are commonly the following. We tried to do it ourselves. We couldn't. We had to go with them. And if you don't do it, we're going to fall behind and we're going to be screwed. That's generally what we get, which is great. That means we got something really interesting on our hands. The other diligence is a lot around the team and product market fit. And product market fit is an understanding as to why the customers have purchased the product, the purchased software, are using it live in production for a mission critical application, and they are referenceable.
It brings up an interesting point. Most companies don't think about that, or they get spooked very easily when you want to talk to their customers. But in this space, you have to. And so for founders out there, look, get a step ahead. You just had three investors tell you this. Get a step ahead. Get testimonials. Get your customers, any kind of reference or any kind of insights you can get from them, a case study, anything of that nature, have that as a part of your diligence process. So when the three of us or anyone else looks at this, we don't have to, but when we do, and we want to go down that further path, speaking with the customer, we've got something of reference that shows and highlights how well they've spoken about you and how much you mean to their business overall. Because your service is one thing, but how much you mean to their business and whether or not it lives or dies leads to so much more, whether it be acquisition or lifelong contracts equaling revenue. These are very important things to have. Gentlemen, I want to come to you both for closing thoughts on all of this we just talked about today as we're reaching that time of the day. Nandan, let's start with you. Closing thoughts on all of this that's happening and where things are going forward.
Right. So according to me, I think manufacturing, supply chain, and logistics is probably the second most affected after the healthcare industry in the global context at this point in time, right? A lot of things have suffered, but it's also been positive for a lot of things. So there's a lot of opportunity for founders to either start something new or get entrenched within their customers, because brands are opening up, logistics companies are opening up. There are a lot of possibilities that they're looking for in terms of increasing their supply base, reducing their costs, so on and so forth. So I think as long as a founder is able to demonstrate that his or her business has not been temporarily impacted in the sense that they've not had spikes just because of COVID-19, right? If they're able to demonstrate a long-term impact on their customers and clients and suppliers, I think they're good to go. So as long as they continue to focus on that, continue to focus on delivering long-term value and have some visibility on that, they're good to go at this point in time.
Ivan.
I think it's a really, really good time to be an entrepreneur, because to start a company is relatively easy. There's plenty of capital available. The cost of getting to product market fit is lower than ever. And if you are smart, if you can build a good team, and if you can find a big enough problem and are able to solve it, opportunities are unlimited.
Couldn't agree more, and absolutely love both the answers. Guys, thank you so much for joining us today. Quick shout out, where can everyone find you? Nandan, where can everyone find you to pitch you, to get in touch with you online?
I'm on LinkedIn. Or you can just search up for me on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. Ivan, same to you.
I'm also on LinkedIn, Ivan Niku, and also my email is ivan@navigatevc.com.
Wonderful. Ivan, Nandan, thank you again both very, very much for joining today's show. Thank you to you, our live audience, for joining in, tuning in. Hope you took a lot away from this, as I know I did, from both Ivan and Nandan. There's a ton to unpack in this episode, so make sure you rewatch it if you're looking at these areas. To the last piece of advice, this is a great opportunity, a great time. There is cash available and there's opportunity aplenty. Be patient, think through, find your product market fit, and build, and talk to us and all those that are joining here on VCTV. Shameless plug, but nonetheless, it is true. Thank you for joining another episode of VCTV. Thank you, Elena, to the entire LA Token team for making this happen. I'm Kyle Ellicott, your host. I will be back here tomorrow to dive a little bit deeper in a few more industries and a few more technologies. Gentlemen, thank you. Elena, LA Token.